Harley Davidson on steroids. Now up here to help me undertake the commentary is Terry Hetherington. He's the former director of the Royal Australian Navy Fleet Air Arm Museum down there at HMAS Albatross at Nowra. Somewhere else you should go when you're down the south coast.
Thanks for the intro, Ando. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Airshow Downunder 2024. It's great to be here to be able to display our Grumman tracker. This, in fact, is the first full airshow that the tracker has performed at its home base at Shellharbour Airport. So, all the time we've had the aircraft here for the last 5 years, it's performed at Haas family days and tarmac days, but we never had a gig previously at Wings over Illawarra, so this is our first gig at Airshow Downunder.
And this is probably the closest that anybody has come for many, many years to be able to see and hear a tracker. The ones that are static, they're fine, they're beautifully restored, they're complete, but you don't get the feel.
That's a very unique sound with the tracker. The first DC-3s in 1935 had the same engine as the tracker, an R1820 Curtiss Wright radial. And somebody commented this morning about the DC-3 with the R1820, but I said they had a muffler. The tracker just has straight through exhaust.
Same as the T-28, the Trojan, and that has individual exhaust stacks.
That's correct, yes.
Now this aircraft is anti-submarine, that's its principal role, but it was also a maritime patrol aircraft in its own right.
Indeed. In addition to the anti-submarine work that we did all around the Australian coast and on exercises in Hawaii and in Singapore and Hong Kong, the trackers were deployed to Broome in 1974-75 and then to Darwin to do coastal surveillance. Initially we were looking for Indonesian fishermen poaching on starfish off the northwest coast, and then up in Darwin when the major influx of boat people were coming out of Southeast Asia. It was the tracker's role to go and identify and detect those boat people coming south towards the northern shores of Australia.
Now here she comes in from the right. Who's flying the aircraft today?
Our pilot today is retired Qantas Captain Steve McMahon. Steve joined the Navy and was trained as a naval observer and navigator to those people who refer to Air Force terminology. Steve is one of very few Navy aircrew who actually operated every seat in the tracker. He operated in the rear seats. He graduated to the tactical coordinator seat in the front right-hand side of the cockpit. Steve was then selected to do pilot training, came back and flew the tracker for many years. After we stopped operating the tracker with the RAM, Steve went to the Air Force and flew the P3.
Now this aircraft is very, very capable. And the other thing about it is, it's huge. Now to land this on HMAS Melbourne, you really had to have your wits about you, and it's a postage stamp compared to the American carrier.
It sure is. Our last aircraft carrier in Melbourne, 20,000 tonne all up, 670 feet in length. With the wingspan of the tracker at 78 feet, there was about a 9-foot clearance. Now you people who aren't metrically challenged like me, you can convert that, but there was a clearance of about 9 feet between the starboard wing chip and the island on the aircraft carrier on landing.
And we're not talking about something that's just sitting there. We're talking about a ship that is moving, it's pitching, it's rolling, and this guy has to go and land it beautifully and not take out anything on the front end of the deck.
Exactly. The aircraft would need at least 15 knots of wind over the deck, sometimes 20 knots for landing. So captain has to turn the aircraft carrier into wind. He might have other ships around him. The other ships clear the way. There's one destroyer will accompany the carrier. It's the rescue destroyer. And here we see our high-speed pass.
Well, have a look at that, and if you think you only had 9-foot clearance from the island on the ship, which is the control position on top of the flight deck, to the wingtip, then you have a look at the Neptune down there, that big blue thing. They were actually flying them off American carriers. That'll give you an idea of the difference in the capacity.
That's right. I mean, our carrier was 20,000 tonnes. Some of the anti-submarine carriers in the US in the 60s and 70s were 40,000 tonne, and we look at the aircraft carriers like the Enterprise and the Carl Vinson and the George H. Bush, they're up to over 100,000 tonne.
Which is bigger than the biggest battleship that was ever produced in World War II.
That's correct, yes.
Now, the armament on the tracker consists of about 4,800 pound or 2,200 kilos. It could carry torpedoes as well as a lot of other things.
There were 6 wing stations, 3 on each wing. They could be armed up with bombs, rockets, depth charges or torpedoes. And perhaps on this pass we will see Steve operate the torpedo bay doors. He'll come down with the landing light on in a second. Torpedo bay doors will be open. We could store 2 torpedoes or multiple depth charges in the torpedo bay as well.
Principally operated with 816 Squadron.
816 was the frontline squadron. The training squadron was 851, based at Nowra. He's not going to pop the torpedo bay doors this pass, maybe on the next pass.
Now this was unique as an anti-submarine aircraft as well, because the Neptune's got sonar buoys that it can drop from inside the fuselage. That's done manual. This isn't.
This aircraft, at the rear of each engine nacelle, there are 16 metal tubes, and the sonar buoys are retained in those metal tubes by a spring clip that's operated by a simple magnetic switch. The pilot or the tactical coordinator control whether he wants to drop one sonar buoy or the whole range of sonar buoys at a time. You'll see behind the Neptune and the Orion there is a fixed magnetic anomaly detector boom. The tracker's boom retracts within the aft fuselage. You'll also see on the Neptune a large radome underneath the fuselage. The tracker's radome retracts up inside the aft section of the fuselage.
It comes down, it looks, well, I'll say rudely, it looks like a garbage bin sitting down underneath.
That's the Poms with their radar-equipped airplanes used to call them the dustbin.
The dustbin.
And that's what it looked like.
I wasn't being that rude then.
Not at all.
Now, we had 2 different varieties of trackers. We got the S-2Gs first, and they operated for quite a few years until there was an incident.
Yes, the trackers were delivered in 1967, 14 aircraft. They were allocated 6 to each squadron and 2 in reserve. In 1976, there was a deliberately lit fire in the tracker hangar. So of the 12 aircraft that were in that hangar, 9 were totally destroyed. 3 were removed from the hangar with fire damage. 2 of those fire-damaged aircraft were repaired. The third of those fire-damaged aircraft is here as a static display with HARS. So as a result of that fire, we had a turnover in the desert at Arizona, selecting another few aircraft. After the fire, they went with a shopping list of 16. So they came back with 16 S-2Gs, a later model but an earlier airframe.
Now this is doing a configured pass in the landing configuration.
So the arrestor hook is down, gear is down. The arrestor hook can pull the aircraft up within a distance of 200 feet on the aircraft carrier. Also on the runways at Nowra we had an airfield arrestor system. Even today, the Air Force has got either fixed or mobile arrestor systems on all of their operating airfields, because the F-18s and the F-111s were originally conceived as Navy airplanes.
Well, you have a look at that arrestor hook, the thing that hooks on the wire that goes across the deck and actually stops the aircraft. People think that it's just a piece of steel that comes out and hooks around. It is definitely not.
It turns the world's biggest disc brake. There's a multiple disc brake system. I believe it was designed upon or adapted from the B-52 main wheel brakes.
And the actual thing that the wire hooks into is a very heavy piece of steel that's particularly shaped and can be unbolted when they wear out, because
Correct.
Every time you trap, you wear the thing out.
Yes, especially on the flight deck. There was a hydraulic restraint system in the aircraft carrier, as opposed to the deck, sorry, the airfield landing system, which was a large tape attached to each end of the steel cable.
Now this looks like a high-speed pass. Do you think we'll see the bomb bay door open here?
I think we might see the bomb bay doors open.
Should we call it a weapons bay?
The torpedo bay.
Doors open. And I love it. Based to advertise on one of those doors, Fly Navy.
That's correct. Steve's co-pilot today is Alex Lemerton. Alex, for a day job, is learning to fly the C-130J Hercules up in Richmond. So it's great to have a younger member of Haas becoming part of our team. We who operated the aeroplanes back in the 60s and 70s and 80s are getting on in age. So we've got some younger team members in the engineering team and in the flight crew team as well.
Mate, you don't look any older than 24.
I haven't aged at all, Endo.
24 summers and quite a few winters. This is wonderful that Haas is keeping these aircraft alive. As I said, Historic Aircraft Restoration Society had very humble beginnings but huge dreams, you know, with guys like Bob Delahunty, who was the president, out at Shayville, out in Western Sydney, way out near the mountains. And from that to move to Bankstown and now down to here with this magnificent facility. All you've got to do is look around and you can see all the static exhibits, all the aircraft that are flying, the Friendship that came in from New Zealand. We've got the Neptune that we'll be seeing here shortly, and of course later on the absolutely beautiful Connie.
Bob has a favourite expression. We started with nothing, we've still got nothing, but look what we've got.
He's absolutely right there. So if anybody is interested in joining Haas, we can thoroughly recommend it. There's a lot of experience to be gained from, I won't say the old guys, I'll say the more experienced guys who are down here, who are assisting to maintain and restore all of these aircraft.
Everybody on the Haas team is willing to pass on their knowledge. We've got people responsible for the Connie maintenance who were Connie engineers at Qantas. So think back to when the Connie was operating at
That
Qantas.
wasn't yesterday.
That wasn't yesterday, that's correct.
So we've gone through the Connie, then we went to the 707, then we went to the 747, now the A380.
That's right.
I was contemplating aviation history a while ago, and I was thinking that I remember seeing Mustangs that were operated by the Citizen Air Force. So we've gone Mustang, Vampire, Sabre, Meteor, Sabre, and then we've gone Mirage, FA-18, and now the
Yes.
I don't think I'll see an X-Wing. I think that'll be a little bit too much for me, I think.
Well, I recommend that everybody stays until the end of the show, because the final flying display today will be the F-35 Lightning II.
And Dan, my co-commentator here today, he is an F-35 pilot, so we'll be able to get aspects on flying that you normally wouldn't, because he's actually being there and doing it.
Indeed. Here we see the tracker landing on, as we say in the Navy.
So he is now aboard.
He's now aboard. He's coming aboard. Yes, you will see at the tail of the airplane there is a solid tyre on a small undercarriage oleo. That was there for the catapult launch. The launching wire, the catapult wire, would pull tension on the nose wheel, and it would lift the nose wheel off the deck. The tail bumper would run along the catapult, so the aircraft was in flying configuration.